Welcome to this explainer, where we're going to walk through the sweeping historical movements of First Chronicles. It is so easy to look at biblical history as just static, dusty records of the past. But today, we're discovering how this specific text was uniquely designed to be a survival guide. It was literally written to re-anchor the identity of a broken, exiled people. Picture this. The year is 538 BC. Jewish exiles are finally coming home to Judah from captivity in Babylon. But they aren't returning to some glorious, thriving kingdom. They are walking into a totally diminished homeland and a completely ruined Jerusalem. That magnificent temple built by Solomon, it's just gone. And because of this, they're facing an agonizing identity crisis. They are looking around at the rubble and asking some really devastating questions. Has God failed us? Is the covenant broken? Are we even still God's people? To resolve this profound crisis, the author traces an epic timeline covering hundreds of years of history. But what's truly revealing here is what the author actually leaves out. He deliberately skips right over the dark tragedy of the Babylonian exile itself. Instead, he focuses entirely on reminding this fragile returning remnant of their enduring historical foundation. He is showing them, right off the bat, that their story absolutely did not end in Babylon. Chapters 1 through 9, Tracing the Bloodline. Now, modern readers, ourselves included, often misunderstand this first major movement. We tend to skip over it because it kind of just looks like a dry, endless list of really difficult names. But for that original audience standing in the ruins of Jerusalem, this was anything but dry. These genealogies aren't just historical records. They actually function as a theological lifeline. Starting all the way back at the dawn of creation with Adam, they trace through the patriarchs, zero right in on the line of Judah and King David, and track all the way down to the very people who had just returned from exile. The message here is incredibly powerful. You are not adrift. You are not erased by the exile. You are anchored in an unbroken bloodline that spans thousands of years. Chapter 10, The Fall of Saul. Once the identity of that remnant is firmly reestablished, the narrative rapidly shifts to a stark historical event: the tragic death of Israel's first king, Saul, at Mount Gilboa. The author dedicates only one single chapter to Saul, using his reign not as a model, but as a really severe warning. The author is using Saul as a stark foil to David. Saul's downfall illustrates the devastating consequences of abandoning the covenant. He was impatient, he actually relied on a medium for guidance instead of God, and ultimately, he lost the kingdom. David, on the other hand, represents the ideal aspect. He's a king whose entire legacy is defined by his profound commitment to seeking the Lord.
The text puts it with absolute, documentary-style clarity. Reading from the ESV, it says, "So Saul died for his breach of faith. He broke faith with the Lord in that he did not keep the command of the Lord." This serves as a definitive warning to those returning exiles. If they want to survive, if they want to rebuild, then true, obedient worship has to be their absolute priority.
Chapters 11 through 29, The Reign of David. With that warning clearly established, this section presents an idealized pattern of messianic kingship. And what's super fascinating here is the author's editorial focus. He deliberately bypasses David's great personal failures, stuff like his terrible sin with Bathsheba or the rebellion of his son Absalom. Why do that? Well, because the goal isn't just to write a biography. It's to present a perfect theological blueprint for the remnant to follow. Just notice how decisively David moves through these historical milestones. He really doesn't waste any time. He is crowned king over united Israel at Hebron. He immediately captures the stronghold of Jerusalem to make it his capital. And, most importantly, he brings the Ark of the Covenant right into the city. He is placing the ultimate symbol of God's presence at the absolute center of national life. Placing God at the center like that brilliantly sets the stage for chapter 17. David expresses this strong desire to build a permanent temple for the Ark. But God flips the script. Instead of David building a house for God, God promises to build a house, a dynasty, for David. The text reads, "I will raise up your offspring after you, one of your own sons, and I will establish his throne forever." This is the Davidic covenant. It's an unconditional promise of an everlasting throne, and it is literally the bedrock of the entire book. This intense commitment to proper worship culminates later on in one of the most critical real estate purchases in history. Following a devastating census that brings a plague upon Israel, David is instructed to build an altar of repentance. And the specific location he's told to use? It's the threshing floor of Ornan the Jebusite, located right on Mount Moriah. what is truly striking about this moment is the sheer cost involved. Arnan actually offers to just give the land to David for free, but David refuses, famously declaring that he will not offer to the Lord a sacrifice that costs him nothing. So he pays a staggering 600 shekels of gold for the site. By doing this, he legally and permanently secures the exact sacred location where the future temple is going to be built. So David has the covenant, and he has the land. But God tells him he cannot be the one to actually construct the temple because he has shed too much blood in warfare. So what does David do? He dedicates his final years to meticulous preparation. He stockpiles massive quantities of gold, silver, iron, and bronze. He receives the divine architectural plans. He organizes the Levi divisions, the priests, and the musicians. He essentially sets everything up perfectly so that his son Solomon only has to assemble it. And this exact transition of power leads us to the grand climax of the text through a concept known as typology. In biblical literature, typology is when a historical person, event, or institution serves as a sort of shadow, pointing forward to a later, greater, and perfect reality. This is where First Chronicles shifts our lens from ancient history straight into eternal theology. Think about it. King Solomon was the immediate fulfillment of God's promise, right? He was an earthly king who built a physical temple of stone and timber. But the covenant language of an everlasting throne reaches way beyond Solomon. David preparing a temple that his son will build perfectly points forward to Jesus Christ. Christ is the true and greater Son of David, the eternal king in whom that everlasting throne is completely and finally fulfilled. 1 Chronicles brilliantly answered the original exiles' crisis by pointing them back to an unbroken promise and looking forward to an eternal throne. It gave them their identity back. But it leaves us with a pretty profound final thought to close out this explainer. If this ancient, unbroken Davidic line ultimately points forward to a timeless king, how does the reality of that eternal throne reshape our own understanding of history today?